Welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Well, this is Greg Boyson, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And everybody who listens to my show knows who I am, Greg Reid. But Greg Reid is on the other side of the screen. He's been on before. He was recently on, and he lives in Carlsbad. And actually, I went to his house on Sunday to pick up the copy of this book. Pardon the little stickies in there, but that's some of the things that I want to ask Greg. Greg, how you doing today?
So good, even I want to be me. And by the way, I got a brand new computer, so those little sounds popping up, I think, is my acknowledgments. I'm just too old to know how to turn it off. So,
hey, my listeners won't know. Hey, well, for my listeners, look, Greg has been quoted in over 150 books, over 40 languages, translated his work. He has even been awarded a placement on the Las Vegas Strip Walk of Stars. Greg Reid is really all over. He's known for Secret Knock. You can see it behind him there. If you want to learn more about Greg, just go to www.gregreid.com. There you can learn more about him. And this is the book, Personal Development. We're going to put a link to it on Amazon. Well, Greg, look, this is all the classics are in here. And when I say all the classics, I think you went back to all of the years of history you had as a person being influenced by all these great people that have crossed your life. You're kind of like me in that respect. I've, everybody from Don Green at Napoleon Hill Foundation to Jim Rome to all of them. I've either met them or spent time with them, and they're wonderful people. What inspired you to kind of compile what you call this ultimate collection and bring these insights to people and do it in a way? I'm going to show people the inside of the book. This is not a hard read, folks. You could basically take this on an airplane in between here in Arizona. You would finish it. So why did you want to do this? Because you've written now how many? What is this? This is your last one, you said.
Yeah, I've been publishing 150 books, 45 languages, and all that good stuff. And this was kind of like my swan song. I'm done doing solo books. I might co-author a book in the future, do a multi-author, but at the end of the day, this is my last solo one. And then I even left my name off the cover because it was all about the content and not the guy who's bringing it to you. And what we did is we distilled the most classic, legendary words of inspiration into modern little sound bites so people could get that aha golden nugget without spending a lot of time. And what does that mean? Well, we're in the Instagram, TikTok world where we had 8 seconds. And I figured, man, if we could explain what Think and Grow Rich is, or As a Man Thinketh, in one paragraph, it will save them 300 pages of reading, but they get the core essence. So perhaps they'll expand it and read the entire book later.
The other thing is, look, we're in cross-generational here, and there's so many generations that don't know many of these influencers that have been in our life. I'm not saying you're my age, but I'm saying that, maybe you're close to my age. July 3rd, I turned 70. And I happen to have been influenced by a lot of the same people that are, by the way, in this great book. And I don't mean influence to the extent, I mean heavily influenced. And one of them, I remember this story when I was in the financial services industry. Somebody told me the Russell Conwell story and the Acres of Diamonds. And to this day, I still cite the Acres of Diamonds. Can you, just for the people who don't have a clue who Russell Conwell was in the Acres of Diamonds, you do it in about 2 pages here in this book, but I bet you can do it in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was interesting. He gave the talk to supposedly like 6,000 people around the globe. And the concept was this: there was this person who was sick and tired. He wanted fame and fortune, and he bought this little farm, but nothing would grow on it. Every time he planted something, nothing would ever come to life. So he tricked someone in the middle of the night to come buy this acreage. And sure enough, they do. And this young man goes out to find his place in the world. And sure enough, wherever you go, there you are. Nothing goes his way. So much so that he ends up even committing suicide. It's a real uplifting read. But the guy back home he's upset because he got tricked and he bought this property in the middle of the night. And sure enough, same thing for him. Every time he planted something in the fields, nothing would grow because these little white shiny rocks kept popping up. And then finally realized there was acres and acres of diamonds in his own backyard. With the moral being, sometimes we're always searching for things outside of ourselves to give us the glory and the exposure and the opportunity. Yet sometimes, the majority of the time, it's right beneath our feet.
That's a great allegory because, frequently in today's world of always on, always trying to do something new, whatever, if we just look underneath our feet or really just look over our shoulder frequently, there's something there that actually we've missed that could actually transform our life. And it's so true in so many ways. We would be remiss if we didn't actually include Napoleon Hill and Don Green, both of our I call him one of my favorite guys in the world because he's just the sweetest 80-year-old guy or 80 something plus year old man. By the way, for my listeners, he runs the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And you jump in this book on page 16 about Think and Grow Rich. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. A Napoleon Hill quote. And I know a lot of people will go, oh, yeah, I've heard all that shit. That sounds like The Secret, right? But the reality is, speak with us because Dr. Hill really did know what was going on here in our subconscious mind,
Mhm.
right? And how we programmed it. And then you went on because you added a few more pages and you talked about the guy who founded Combined Insurance, which I'm trying to remember his name right now,
W.
but
Clement Stone.
W. Clement Stone. He also came up with Success Magazine. That was his magazine as well, because that was during the day of Earl Nightingale, right? We all listened to Earl Nightingale tapes. So tell us about how this has made an impact on you, even at your ripe old age today, the whole Think and Grow Rich series.
Yeah, so I'm 60, just for because we're talking about it. And I gotta tell you, I still skateboard every day and live a pretty vibrant life, which is crazy because when I was a kid, 60 was out to pasture, and now we're just getting going. But when it comes to Think and Grow Rich, for those of you who are new to my work, I was very fortunate to write the Think and Grow Rich series through the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Sharon Lecter and I wrote 3 Feet from Gold together. Bob Proctor and I wrote Thoughts Are Things. We did, all these amazing things, but this is my favorite, PMA. So W. Clement Stone was a firm believer of positive mental attitude. And they had a friendly debate between Hill and with Stone. And Hill said that the number one chief goal and aim for anyone to have was a definite major purpose. He said, if you got a purpose, you'll have success, you'll find it because you have your due north. Where Stone said, no, PMA, positive mental attitude, is the most important factor. And they kind of had this little squabble. But the concept is that if you have a positive mental attitude and optimism, you'll constantly be searching for the solution, where pessimists will always be focusing on the negativity and the challenges ahead. And I think at the end of the day, they were both correct. But at
Right.
the end of the day, I think that's why I'm connected, because I was very fortunate to work with Don Green and some amazing people.
You were blessed, and I've been blessed by Don, and Don's been on the show 6, maybe 10 times with books that he's written as a result of finding some of the archived materials from Napoleon Hill. And another guy I got to meet and still talk with his daughter is Charlie Tremendous Jones. They have a publishing business in Pennsylvania. And Charlie Tremendous Jones used to come to all the financial services insurance, and he was always hyped up. The guy was about as excited as they could be and running around the stage. But he reminded me of Zig Ziglar too, right? It's just kind of like, okay. And I love his quote: "We are the same today as we'll be in 5 years, besides two things: the people we meet and the books that we read." You dedicated like just one page to this. So if you would, you're a shining star of this. I mean, the people you met and the books that you read and or the books that you write. Speak with the listening audience out there today about how so imperative you and I have been transformed as a result of this. I'm going to call it quote from Charlie Tremendous Jones.
Yeah, Charlie Tremendous was a father figure to me. And so, he was my greatest mentor. He's the one who opened the doors to the Napoleon Hill Foundation that started a lot of this stuff. So he really was the precursor for myself, for my career, and a lot of other people. And what's also interesting is that the guy was very, like you said, vibrant. And
Yeah.
he always did this one joke. And I tried to repeat it and I never could do it. And I was so jealous of it. So he would get up on stage and he'd sit there and say, "My wife Gloria and I this month will be 27 years married." And everyone would applaud. And he'd go, "Wait a minute, wait a minute." He says, "It wasn't that good." And it laugh. So when I got married, my wife and I would go around and I'd try that same joke. "My wife and I have been married 2 full years. Wait, it hasn't been good." Everyone go, "Boo." It never, it never translated. It drove me nuts. But
Because you never had enough years behind your belt there.
I know it's great. So, but I'm going to tell you one Charlie Tremendous Jones, because nobody gets to hear some of this stuff. So here's my one Charlie Tremendous Jones story. He called me at the end of his days. He was going through cancer, and he lost his voice and he was losing his eyesight. And he called me from Malaysia, and he was doing his final tour. And he goes, "Greg." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Great news." So, "What's up, Charlie?" He goes, "I lost my voice. No, it's completely gone." I go, "How is that great news, Charlie? You're a motivational speaker." And he goes, "You don't get it." I go, "What, Charlie?" He says, "In Malaysia, I went to the microphone. I started whispering in it, and everyone finally stopped talking and listened to what I had to say." He goes, "I should have lost my voice years ago."
Yeah, these are great stories. So for anybody who's listening now who can relate to Greg and I about these particular authors and thought leaders, you certainly you'll relate. Now, we all love Blessed Wayne Dyer. Things are the way we think they are because we think they are that way. And this is your little chapter on paradigm shift.
Mm.
And I'd like for you to comment because I didn't know Wayne personally, although I did go to many of his workshops through the Hay House. And we met, but we weren't ever personal friends. But he did so much for so many people through his books. I go all the way back to that. What was that first book that he wrote? And he used to do the whole thing around the enchilada on PBS, and get my books. And I always bought everything that the guy had. So talk about paradigm shift, why it's so important for listeners out there.
Well, it keeps going down to that quote: "Things are the way you think they are because you think they are that way." And
Mhm.
I'd like to add something called TTE, and that means talk to everyone, because everyone we meet will know something we don't know. And if you want to change your paradigm, what you believe to be true, surround yourself with people that might have a different perspective. And then all of a sudden you see things from a different set of lens. And so for myself, I'm probably going to be the worst politician in the world because I love when people change my mind. So if I'm sitting there saying, the glass is half full, someone come up to me and show that it's half empty, boom, it's pure genius. And so for
Mhm.
myself, the paradigm is what you agree and perceive to be your truth. And that is your truth until that paradigm is shifted.
Well, and again, we understand the power of the subconscious, and we know that whether you use a hypnotherapist or you use your own meditation, but if you can get rid of the negative self-talk, which we've all of us have talked about, you can literally reprogram the mind to create almost anything you want in your life. How about I say not almost anything? Create whatever it is that you want in your life.
Amen.
Because it is the language that we put it in that actually manifests itself into our life. And we know that. You have a chapter here on truth and contradiction. I'm going to hold up this page so people can kind of see this. Just because someone says something doesn't mean it is correct. It simply means it's correct to them, and that at that moment in time. Look, today you then put some quotes in here from the Bible, from Abraham. Patience is a virtue. We're living in a world where truth is really just bizarre at this point. With social media being so influential on people's truths. Um, we know we're living in a divisive time. We know we're living in weird times, but this isn't the first time this has ever occurred in this world, right? This is like we're thinking, oh God, we're the only ones ever done this. So go back to the Romans in the Colosseum, right? The reality is that what would you tell people today who are feeling extremely confused by where they want to find their truth and what's the best way for them to find it?
All right. Well, I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a therapist, so I'm going to preface with everyone for that one. So, one of the guys who invented Chuck E. Cheese shared an incredible thing. He says, with enough examination, all truths become false. And it stuck with me and it just drove me nuts. I go, with all
True.
enough examination, all truth. And then I started looking back. I go, when you and I were a kid, Pluto was a planet. When you and I were in our 20s, you could catch AIDS from a toilet seat. Just 3 years ago, you could catch COVID by standing in line. All the
Mhm.
things were proved to not be true, but we were taught that that was fact. So a fact is just what the general population agrees to be true at a chosen time. So at one time, the world was flat. It was. That's why Christopher Columbus went to go discover it was round. Everything was one way. So the fact of the matter is, if we have an open mind to all that is possible, rather than just what we've been exposed to, your life could open up to brand new paradigms and never be the same.
Yeah, and again, as you said, who was the guy from Chuck E. Cheese? I don't remember his name. Was
Gene
that
Land.
Nolan? Was that wasn't Nolan Bushnell?
Yeah,
It was
well, I
who?
have his
What?
name. Gene Landrum is the guy who created Chuck E. Cheese, and he
Uh,
he was working at Atari for Nolan, and went in and asked for $1 million to start the first ever one. Nolan gave it to him so he'd go back to work and focus. And sure enough, it blew up. So Gene was actually the president of the first 100 stores until it blew up and became what it is. But Nolan's the guy who financed it. But at the end of the day, it was Gene's amazing idea.
I think Chuck E. Cheese is still around somewhere. I don't know where it is, but the reality is Atari isn't anymore. But that's only because it's been surpassed by so much other. But that's what people have to realize is like there's a place and time for everything, right? And as we progress through society, whether it's Steve Jobs and the iPhone or the things that were originally people were talking about Macs the other day that um, guy Kawasaki was on here, and he told the story about sitting in the boardroom with Steve Jobs, and that they remember the ad campaign, Think Different.
Mm.
And I love this story because guy says that the ad guy was in the room, and so there were two videos of this campaign with Einstein and all these other people that they were using at the time to buy Macs because they were being competed against by Microsoft. And they thought the company was going to go down. And the ad guy says to Steve, he says to Guy, I'm going to give one copy to Steve, and I'm going to give one copy to Guy. And I love the story because then he said, Steve turns to Guy and he says, or he turns to the ad guy and he says, no, you're going to give both copies to me. And Guy turns to him and says, what's wrong, Steve? Don't you trust me? And Steve says, no, I don't trust you. And they said, well, that's okay. I don't trust you either. Meaning he said that back to Steve Jobs. And he says in this story, and that is like, I think this kind of a famous story, that that little move, because he was just kind of pissed off, cost him quite a big fortune. So it's interesting to see in time, everything has its place in time. And you talk about this part in your book, becoming a go-giver. And I remember having these guys on the show. So Bob Berg and John David Mann wrote that book. And actually, Mann did a book with his wife as well, if I remember correct. The two of them speak about the whole go-giver thing. It says no one will buy from you because you have a quota. Okay. What points were you trying to make here with that?
Dude, you just went on a monologue for so long that I want to go back to your first question. So the first question was the idea of truth and I think contradictory. So I
Yeah.
really want to stay on that. So the concept of that one is that it goes down the paradigm, and I'll give you an example. One person says the glass is half full. Another person says the glass is half empty. They're both correct. One person says good things come to those who wait. The other one says good things come to those who wait, but only the things left behind by those who hustled ahead of them. They're both right. And we realize just because one person says something, there is an opposing point of view. So it's just another way of looking things from, like I said, a different set of lens. When you talk about jobs, and again, I got a chance to hang a lot of time with Steve Wozniak and hear the stories behind the stories of how they embrace their lack to go towards their adversity and find the shortest, cleanest path was absolutely phenomenal. I just love
Yeah.
it. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
it
It
really is
is.
a story within the story. And then at the end of the day, the go giver here, John Mann actually ghost wrote, I don't know if you know this or not, many of the most famous books you've ever read. And he
I
was,
didn't know that.
yeah, he was a ghostwriter. And so trust me, you've read many of his books that with other people's names on it. And what happened is that when Bob went to him to do this book, John said, I'd like to put my name on this one and come out myself. And sure enough, they did. And they negotiated a deal where they became co-authors. And that put John on the map, even though behind the scenes, the guy's been inspiring us for generations and generations. John Mann's the greatest writer around, just so you know. So he's absolutely phenomenal.
He is. And I had the pleasure of not interviewing him, but interviewing his wife for the book The Go Giver.
Mm.
So it was really interesting. So you have your own quote in this book. And it, for my listeners, maybe, or people that are watching this on the video, it says, never beg a person to give them a compliment, opportunity, or money. Okay. Um, and you talk about years ago, I was fortunate enough to mentor in the inner city kid in a local town in San Diego. Talk about this kid, this very tall kid as it was. And what did you learn?
Okay, I love this, and this is what's so cool about this book. No matter what page you open to, there's some golden gem and nugget. And people listening, watching, trust me, get a copy of this personal development. You'll be glad you did. Put it. I call it a bathroom book. Put it in the John. Every time you're doing your business, open it a page or two. Love it. So the idea is never beg a person to give them a compliment, opportunity, or money. Now, this is why this is important. How many times have we went to our family friends to beg them to give them an opportunity or some type of opportunity or some, cash or to give them a compliment? If you go up and say, "God, your hair looks great today." Ah, no, it doesn't. It's a thing. Well, I'm not going to say, "No, it really does look great." I give you a compliment. If you don't want it, I'm not going to beg you to give you that compliment. It's the same thing with money. It's the same thing with opportunity. So I just have a rule of thumb where I never beg a person to give them a compliment, opportunity, or money. Pretty simple stuff.
Now, tell us the story about this young man that you were mentoring.
Yeah, I call him David the Goliath. He was 6'4" at only 14 years old. And
Yeah, the kid was huge.
his father passed away. He didn't have a positive role model, got arrested for stealing a bicycle and, was carrying a pocket knife to school. And they met him through a local mentorship program here in San Diego. And we built up a bond. Every week I'd pick him up and say, "You want to go to the movies, arcade?" He goes, "Yeah." You start building this thing up. And I could see he wanted something special, but he didn't know what to do. So I took him over to Kmart, again, a store back in the day, right? Sears, Kmart, all these different ones, JC Penney's.
Right,
And I took him to Kmart and I said, "Pick out a bike, any bike you want, you can have it." And he goes, "I can't do it. I'm just a kid. I got no money." I said, "Let's leave." He goes, "No, wait, how can I do it?" I said, "Pick out a bike." And he comes over and he goes, "Bam." I go, "Great,
right.
you can have it." He says, "Well, what can I do?" And I says, "What can you do?" He goes, "I can mow lawns. I can wash windows. I can mow lawns." I go, "The easiest way to hit a goal is to have a goal to hit." And that's what you did. And what he did is he put flyers all around the town for these odd jobs. And every week I'd pick him up and say, "Movies, arcade, back to Kmart." And he paid down on that bike. And the moral is we can have anything and everything once we set our goal and intention is exactly where we want to go.
That's a great story because you were teaching this young man something along the way. One, responsibility, and two, and to have a goal. He wanted the bike. You got the bike for him, and he paid you back for the bike, right? Is that how it worked?
He did a layaway. So that's how it was back in,
Oh, he put it in the layaway. Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it.
that
Well,
that's actually part of the story, Greg. I forgot about this. At that time, the bike, when he came over, God, this is a great little aha. He says, okay, how can I get it? And I says, well, I got $20. I'll give it to you. We can go to the movies with this or the arcade, or you can put it on this bike and pay it off. And he chose to go put it down on layaway. I forgot about that little nugget. Thanks.
There you go. See, something good always comes for this. Now, I happen to be driving home from I'd come back to Irvine. I'd flown in and out of Irvine, and I'm listening to Brene Brown, and you have her spotlighted, this spotlight, right? And I'm not saying every one of my listeners knows who she is, but probably most of them do. You say esteemed researcher, speaker, groundbreaking ideas around vulnerability, courage, and shame. And the quote was, I now see how owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we will ever do. She has a TEDx talk, which has been viewed 2 million, 3 million times, whatever it is. What is it that you think people should know about Brene Brown and being vulnerable?
Was very interesting. I'm glad you brought that one up. Through the process, a lot of the people that I included in this project are people I've never met in person, and she's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Watch the things of this nature, but I realized it'd be remiss to not put somebody who's such a personal development icon into a personal development book. So we do this book is from Aristotle to Ziegler, A to Z, right? And kind of
Mm-hmm.
incorporate as many people as we can, but about embracing our vulnerability. There's a great quote my former wife came up with that I put in this book. I think I took credit for it, but it was her. And she says, the true measure of someone being transparent and authentic is the ability and the promise to show the uncomfortable parts of ourselves. Think about that one. Most people,
Repeat that one for everybody.
okay, it's the ability and willingness to show the uncomfortable parts of ourselves. That's what being transparent is. And I think we've got away from that. We think being transparent is to show one side of ourselves on Instagram, where we're, not at the Maldives, but that's not it.
Right.
Actually, to be really transparent, to be authentic, is the ability and the willingness to show and share the uncomfortable parts of ourselves. And that's such a powerful statement when you sit back and think about it, because that's what it comes down to. And what she is saying is that we need to own our good, bad, and different. But here's the challenge. We all have 10 things going on in our lives. 8 of them, amazing. 1 of them, iffy. 1 of them, suck. Unfortunately, majority of us focus on the suck, and we don't give ourselves credit. Hey, good job keeping the phone bill on this month. Hey, good job paying that rent. The things that we take for granted, where other people would do anything to trade our place, we forget how amazing it is. And right now, majority of us in our lifetimes are exactly in the spot that we hoped and prayed we'd be at one time. And now that we've arrived, we don't have appreciation and gratitude for where we're at.
That is a very, very good statement. And I think that gratitude, I was just on with an author prior to you, and gratitude, she called her book graciously assertive. And we're talking about leadership. And you have a quote in this book, a positive attitude will not get the desired result every time, but a negative one surely will. And you just kind of mentioned it just then, is that if we can have an attitude of gratitude, right? Versus this focus on, you said there, Brene Brown, you said 1 bad one, 8 good ones, 1 maybe so. Yet our our thought patterns go to the negative one because it takes all of our energy and all of our attention. Yet there's 9 other ones that we should be so grateful for, right? And so that quote kind of sums it up, doesn't it? Your
It's
quote.
Yeah, I've got this tennis coach, and every time we go out on the court, I'd say, "Here comes my A game. Get ready, coach." I go, "I'm taking you down this time," and he'd pull me into the net and say, "Greg, slow down. That positive attitude isn't going to get you anywhere. You got to work on your stroke." Next time I'd meet up, "Here it comes, coach. I'm going to tell you, I've been practicing. I did a stretch, and I'm going to take you down today." He'd pull me to the net, say the same thing. Eventually, this kept going on until finally he pulled me to the middle of the net and says, "Greg," he goes, "having that positive attitude is great and all, but that's not going to win you games." And I looked at him and I pulled out that quote that I wrote. It says, "You might be right, A positive attitude may not get the desired results every time, but a negative one surely will. And that stuck with me. So I decided to put it in this book.
Well, I'm glad it's in there. And like you said, get this book. I will put a link to it. You have this one generation to the next, and you talk about Kyle Wilson, who worked hand in hand with one of the greatest voices in modern motivation, compiled a list of his mentors' best quotes and Rome sayings. That's Jim Rome. And these are the gems. And you put 2 pages of quotes by Jim Rome in there. What was your personal interaction with Jim? And what did you think? What do you think our listeners could pull away from some of Jim's experiences and the things that he's written and the books he's written?
So I never got a chance to meet him while he was living. When he passed away, they had his funeral, and somehow I got on this list to go VIP to be with all the legends behind the scenes during his funeral. And I got to go backstage with Tony Robbins and Brian, you name it, all the cast of characters, and me, a knucklehead. I was just a green kid at that time. And I got to tell you, it was so interesting just watching the way that people spoke about this man. And it just impacted me so much that one person made such a great impact. And then I started watching his stuff and listening to his tapes, and I realized he was a simple guy. That's what I liked about him. He wasn't this crazy this philosophical guy with a long beard on the mountaintop, sitting cross-legged. He was a normal dude, but he saw things from a different perspective, kind of like a Jerry Seinfeld of positivity, right? He
No
would,
soup for you.
yeah, exactly.
The soup Nazi.
He would notice common things and then craft it in a way that we could see ourselves in that messaging. So I love the way of his simplistic tone and mannerisms, because it's impacted the lives of millions.
Yeah, so for those who've never listened to or read one of Jim Rome's books, do go out there and check him out. He was famous for what he taught, and a lot of it was around selling, right? It was, he was big around marketing and sales. Now, you kind of last page of this book, when I say last, the back cover, I want to end up here. Imagine all that is possible the moment we realize that all that is possible. Greg Reid, that's your quote. What would you tell people about imagining what is possible? Because you just said a second ago, hey, I was this little green guy with all these other people, yet your life has been so blessed with meeting some of the greatest people, mentors that have influenced you into shaping who you are today, right? Your success is a result of your willingness to step out, be totally uncomfortable, go places that you'd never gone before, and show up. And I think really the possible is, because one of your things in there was about action when we were talking about Napoleon Hill, and action was in the word. What would you say in summing up for our audience was really the most important influencers, and what would you leave with our audience? What would you leave our audience?
Yeah, I'd say it's the action in the law of attraction that makes our dreams come true. You got to think it, feel it, off your backside. Got to take action. You got to do it. There's so many. I mean, Don Green, obviously amazing. Sharon Lecter has been amazing to me. Charlie Tremendous Jones, all these different people. I will say also Bob Proctor, when we got a chance to write Think and Grow Rich Thoughts or Things, was a monumental moment for me. It was a good shift. And I really, really, truly enjoyed that journey. But my number one person by far is probably something you're not seeing coming is Brian Tracy. So Brian was the very first person to ever give me a quote, a little blurb on the back of my book. And I felt so proud and honored for him to do that. And recently, a year or so ago, he came out with a new book. And when I went to Barnes and Noble and I turned it over, my quote endorsing his book was on the back. And I went, Simba, the circle of life, right?
Yeah.
And I'll end with this part, is that he taught me one lesson that changed my life. And I'm always in gratitude for this. He said, Greg, the secret is sell your way out of it. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, everything minus some catastrophic illness is sellable. Now, what do you mean? He goes, well, most people, when they're having a tough time, they focus on cutting back on toothpicks and post-it notes and toilet paper because they're saving money. Because that's the wrong mindset. He goes, how could you go get a $5,000 sale, make enough profit from that you don't have to worry about this little stuff and it takes care of itself? He goes, find a way to sell your way through. That has changed my life so many times over, where I've found myself at the, despair, darkest of times, where it rings and I have a little Brian on my shoulder saying, sell your way out of it, because someone out there is waiting to hear what you got to say. And for the people watching this for the first time, understand this: what's common sense to you is genius to somebody else. Somebody else is waiting to hear what you've got to say. My son, 12 years old, plays this little Fortnite game. He's a genius at it. And guess what? Kids will pay $20 to sit in a chair right next to him to watch him play this video game. Why? He's going to do it anyway, but he knows all the tricks where they can learn from it. And just what you're doing, your daily activities that you think is normal, someone out there is waiting to learn from you so they can duplicate it for themselves.
That's perfect. And on that note with Brian Tracy, I was invited by Jim. He had a little session down in La Jolla, and Jim Cathcart, and Brian was there. And I hadn't seen Brian in a long time. Brian's sitting across the room. Cathcart asked me to tell some stories, and then Brian. And as a result of that, Brian and I connected. We just did a podcast about his most 32 Laws of Success book that just came out. And I was in Solana Beach. We spent 3 hours around the coffee table, and we created a whole new venture together. And the reality is here's this guy in his 80s, and I really give him credit, still out there, super active, like 2.1 million people following him on Facebook and Instagram and all these places. But he really is an exceptional guy. And when he talks, you listen, because of the way he actually has perfected the way in which he delivers a message. And I'm glad that he was the first person to provide an endorsement on the back of your book. And I want to thank you for being on Insight Personal Growth, sharing some of your wisdom and insight, and the wisdom and insight from the people you've learned from in personal development. This is Greg's last book that he'll write himself, but it's not going to be his last book, because the reality is he'll probably find someone to team up with to do another book. But thanks for being on Inside Personal Growth, Greg.
I got to tell you, Greg, one of my favorite things about you is you're one of the only people in the entire industry that actually consumes this material. A lot of people talk about it, people will scan through, but you're one of the few people that actually are a student's mindset, where all the stuff you just were talking, everything you just interviewed for me for, you already know the answers, but you come across as a student's mindset to put the guest at ease, which is very special. And more importantly, it's cool to have a little friendly reminder of all the stuff that you already are aware of. And now it's time for us to get off our backside, take action, and go do something with it.
I love it. Thanks for being on Inside Personal Growth. Namaste.